Okay, got it up? Now, the 1970s comes to us with, I don't know if I'd call it necessarily a super big enlightenment from the 1960s, but, you know, in '68, we elected a new president in the United States. His name's Richard Milhous Nixon. So he becomes president, and you know, he's the president that we typically note as being really good with foreign diplomacy, things like that. He's the one that really is one of the first to start doing what we call détente. And détente means easing of tensions. You remember when you're watching Forrest Gump and you start seeing the ping pong teams? Okay, that was ping pong diplomacy. That was easing of tensions with the United States and China. Okay, we'll also see where there's high points and low points. You know, with the Soviet Union, we have more of a détente with them in the 1980s. Okay, we seem to have a little bit more of a break with them during that time period. The 1970s, 1970. One of the things, you know, because this is a world history class, so we try to teach things that are really kind of international. The Aswan High Dam. The Aswan High Dam is built and goes into full use in Egypt and creates Lake Nasser. It ends up causing a lot of the problems that historically had plagued Egypt with floods. The converse of that is the idea that for agriculture, they really needed the floods. You know, for the economy and you know, the not knowing if it's going to flood or not, that could be a big problem. One of the things that also occurs is a lot of the antiquities that was there would be destroyed. They either have to move it or it's just destroyed. So some of the ramifications of that particular endeavor caused the loss of some artifacts. Also, we discussed a major group with the last decade, the Beatles. They break up. They break up in 1970. I know why. We also have something that maybe many of you have never seen before, but Dr. Hendrickson knows all about. Okay, because she's a computer guru. The floppy disk. It came out in 1970.
Actually, have some of those numbers.
What?
I was in here jumping myself.
I got you.
Now, one of the things that happens during this time period, remember in '48. In '48, we started the present-day country of Israel. It would be recognized by the United States. Israel has lots of neighbors, and none of the neighbors, at least initially, they have a little bit better understanding with some of them now. But through the '60s and the '70s, we see a lot of interaction between those countries. Egypt would be one of them also, that we see a lot of interaction, you know, and conflict. So, big problems. One of the reasons why that Israel would have such issues with some of the other countries is the area that we typically, because it was Palestine. So you have this group of people called Palestinians. Now remember, when you're taking notes, I'd prefer you to just do a bullet and try to remember it. That way you can pay attention to me, rather than writing down everything I try to say. Okay. So Israel is having some issues with Palestinians, those people that also claim that nation. Still have issues today, Palestinians. Some Palestinians had figured out that one way to get attention for their cause is to cause terrorism, to cause, you know, various actions. One of their leaders, you know, during that time period, who was a major leader, his name would be Yasser Arafat. And he was highly noted for that type of stuff. One of the things that ends up happening is they end up hijacking 5 airplanes during 1970. And of course, you know, what do you think they're going to do with the hijacked plane?
Crash it. Crash it into the
Well, that would have been in 2000.
Oh, I didn't hear what date you said.
Yeah, so 1970s, they are probably trying to get somebody released. You know, it's like we've got this plane full of people or whatever it might be. We're going to release, you know, this if you release so many political prisoners, that sort of thing. Usually it wasn't for money. You know, anything like that. It was usually some sort of release of prisoners. It was always really good. They seemed to target a couple of airports. They always seemed to get, you know, like something out of Rome, something out of Athens, maybe Beirut, possibly Cairo, something. But usually it was a U.S. or a European plane. Typically, you know, TWA was a definite target.
Don't want to go on those like that.
No, no, no. Okay, so the 1970s, we see people like, remember I had you look up Golda Meir? So she's really important, 60s, 70s. And I don't mean to say it's unusual to have a female leader, because it's really not. It's just, you know, Golda Meir. If you look at Golda Meir, can I use your computer for a second? I mean, look at this lady. She's a grandma. You know, she looks like a little grandma. Do you know where she's from?
Israel.
Wisconsin. Okay, she's from Wisconsin, Madison, I believe. And anyway, you know, she goes when Israel is being established as a country. She goes there. She helps develop the country. She helps negotiate with all these people across the globe. You know, people who are in the, we call it sometimes the diaspora. It means they're spread all out everywhere. And to get people to donate money to help build Israel. She was real big into that. The biggest problem with Golda Meir was that she ended up making some internal enemies, people within Israel that didn't appreciate her boisterousness. So anyway, she was one of those that got a little notoriety. Okay, let's look at a little geography. Okay. Remember, we're 1970, we still are having issues with Vietnam, right? Okay. If we think about the geography of the area, we kind of think about like Vietnam kind of being like this. Like this is Vietnam. And then you have a country up here that's kind of small, inland, it's Laos. And then you have a country that's here, and that's Cambodia. Okay? We have a river that goes through here called the Mekong River. When we're fighting in Vietnam, you remember it's a conflict, it's not necessarily a war, even though it's the same thing, except it's not declared. So you've got this river. This used to be French, kind of the whole thing, you know, collectively as French Indochina. But you have people who are Vietnamese, North Vietnamese, or just anybody against, you know, the American cause, would cross over the Mekong River into Cambodia or Laos. We couldn't do anything because we didn't want to cross that particular border. We didn't want it to escalate. That was another term that I had you know. What we ended up doing under the Nixon administration was we bombed Cambodia. We sent forces into Laos, you know, to find those people who were constantly coming across and fighting us. Well, that gets in the news, that causes problems, and it causes protests. In 1970, we have a protest at a college campus called Kent State. Kent State's in Ohio, right? Okay. At Kent State, you have these college protesters. You know, they're protesting the bombing of Cambodia, they're protesting the war. They go and even take over like buildings within the college campus. Lo and behold, when people start pointing guns and that sort of stuff at protesters, something goes off and we have protesters who are shot. It's one of our, you know, we think of protesters throughout, you know, other countries' histories, like Tiananmen Square that I'll mention in a little bit, and we're like, oh, that could never happen here. Kent State. So they're protesting, and they have Kent State shootings. (1971). I'm going to tell you a story. See, back in the day, you know, Dr. Henderson probably didn't even know this because she was just a wee little babe. But back in the day, we had to adjust our schedules to watch the shows we really wanted to see. Friday nights, 8 o'clock, I like Dallas. So I would have to adjust my schedule to where I was always at home on a Friday night. If I'm going to leave, of course my parents didn't let me go anywhere. I had brothers and sisters that were always in trouble, so I never got to do anything. But anyway, so Friday nights at 8 o'clock, I would always watch that. When I got older, old enough to drive or whatever, I'd kind of plan my schedule after 9 o'clock. Wednesday nights, there was a show called Dynasty. People watched Dynasty. You didn't have a VCR. Now VCRs will be invented and will come out, but you know VCRs cost lots and lots of money. Not everybody could afford one. My first VCR that I got, you know, I would say a decade later, but it seems like a decade later, was pretty expensive.
I don't know, there was a VCR in our house when I was in grade school, so. And I was like, I remember being able to set it and record a show, that's why.
We got one when I was in my first year of college. And I remember the first movie, but we won't go into that one. No, the first, yeah, we won't go to that one. I went back to that with somebody else the other day. It's a history novel, or history movie.
Yeah, we made history at your house too.
That thing thrown out the house.
What was it?
I'll tell you later.
But
But
like bring it up and then not.
television.
You gotta tell us now.
Television.
Was it Cheech and Chong?
Were you with your wife?
No.
Was it Cheech and Chong?
But you've got a new series that comes out in '72 called MASH. You ever heard of that?
Yes, still comes on.
MASH was
Awesome.
MASH was extremely interesting because MASH was during the Vietnam era, but it was depicting supposedly life during Korea, the Korean conflict. You know, and that would be one of the longest running shows in history. You ever heard of a guy by the name of Mark Spitz? This guy who had a really bad, no, just kidding. He was a diver, swimmer. And he ended up winning in the '72 Olympics. He ended up winning 7 gold medals, so that's kind of a notable person to remember from that. Now, at this Olympics, the '72 Olympics was in Munich, Germany. Okay. '72 Olympics. '72 Olympics was one of those that you probably have maybe seen either a documentary or a movie made about it. The Israeli team who was in the Olympics, this is Summer Olympics, who was in the Olympics was attacked. They attacked that particular team. They went into their compound and they took hostages. They killed people and then took hostages. In an attempt to release the hostages from getting on another plane, bus, whatever it might have been. I don't remember exactly that part. They're all dead. They killed them all. So the Olympics was, you know, impacted heavily by terrorist actions. Israel, you know, constantly during the 1970s was a target of terrorism or people trying to bring about some sort of change, you know, through us or whatever because of terrorism and our linkage with them. But in this particular case, it was the Israeli team that was targeted. '72 Olympics. We come out with a pocket calculator. Yep. Interesting thing. There's a company called Texas Instrument that became very, you know, big in the computer world, the technology world during that time.
Isn't that what we use?
Yes.
Probably.
TI, yeah.
Now, the best invention that came out to me was when I was in, I would say it was an 8th grade class, but I had a watch that was also a calculator, so I could like take a test and kind of
I remember those.
You were probably what, kindergarten?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know. I can't remember that far back.
Okay, we also have another problem. The problem involves something called Watergate. See, Richard Nixon was president, Republican. And Richard Nixon and other leaders of the Republican Party, you know, the cabinet, I guess, or close advisors. They are caught spying on the Democratic headquarters, or Democratic Party, at the Watergate building, Watergate compound. And it gets lots and lots and lots of attention. The media just will not leave it alone. We'll end up seeing a vice president that resigns. Vice President Nelson Rockefeller, he will resign. So we'll have a new vice president that comes in. His name is Gerald Ford. Okay, Gerald Ford's from Michigan. Though he wasn't always a Ford. Now I'm going to tell you a way that you can make you some money. Okay, you can go up to mom or dad or whoever you want to, and you're like, hey, you know, whatever the amount is that you want to bet, then say, you know, which president was also a king? And they're going to, of course, say something like George Washington. This is all that's what it's actually Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford was a king because Gerald Ford was adopted. His name prior to Ford was King. So anyway, most people don't know that. Gerald Ford is vice president. The reason why that's important is because he wasn't elected. He wasn't elected vice president. He was appointed. He never went through the election process for president, at least at that point. Then, because of impeachment hearings, you know, trying to get the president impeached, Richard Nixon, he ends up resigning. So Richard Nixon resigns. So the vice president takes over the office of president and never was elected. He never went through the election, you know, on the party ticket or anything like that. So we have a president, Gerald Ford, who never was elected, which is kind of an interesting factoid. One of the other people that was real notable during that time period, and I see it on the screen, Henry Kissinger. Okay? Henry Kissinger was a statesman during that time period, and he was East German, wasn't he? East German? He was German.
He was German, I can't remember.
He was German for that point, but he did a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff with our foreign policy. Very smart individual. So Watergate gave us a new president. 1973 also starts an extremely controversial topic in our history called Roe versus Wade. And Roe versus Wade is that landmark court case that deals with abortion. Okay. Politicians today will still, you know, sometimes talk about Roe v. Wade, and that's what they're talking about. They're talking about that particular court case and its implications. In 74, we have something that gets a lot of attention. We have something with a lady by the name of Patty Hearst. Anybody tell me anything that happened to Patty Hearst? Yes, sir? She was kidnapped. Patty Hearst was part of the Hearst family. And the Hearst family was a big publishing family. They did newspapers, magazines, that sort of stuff. And Patty Hearst gets kidnapped, and then what does she do while being kidnapped? She's really brainwashed and starts following them. You know, it's like they rob a bank, she's there with them holding a gun. That sort of thing. But anyway, Patty Hearst. Of course, this is also a time period where you had stories about like Charles Manson and the murders that went on in California and everything with like what's the lady? Sharon Tate, an actress. Gruesome stuff.
Fun.
Was it the appropriate response? 75. Remember, we just did this about Cambodia. 73, 74, we're ending the Vietnam conflict, but we still have some notable actions that go on in this area, in particular in Cambodia. We had the rise of a military dictator called Pol Pot. Pol Pot. He was the Khmer Rouge, part of that, but Pol Pot is his name. And he doesn't really seem to appreciate any sort of intellectual. Anybody who would be in opposition to him and his focus. So he rounds up anybody that they might even remotely consider to be an intellectual. I'm talking millions. And they have a genocide. They kill them. There are terms, and they have movies that are made from it, but like the killing fields, where you just have like dead bodies everywhere. So he was probably one of the most gruesome individuals in world history. Pol Pot. Okay? Pol Pot. His mother named him that, I guess. 76. 76, we also see, we had the 72 Olympics, we had the 76 Olympics. There was a little girl from Romania, and her name was Nadia Comaneci. And Nadia Comaneci, she had 7 perfect 10s in gymnastics. So she's kind of the goal that nobody seems to ever match up to. 77. Elvis Presley dies. Elvis Presley dies. We also have a mini-series that really was controversial, and people across the nation really did watch, but it was a mini-series called Roots. Alex Haley writes a book, and his book is put into a mini-series, and we watched it. We also start seeing and start hearing about a country that they've been doing it all along, but we had our own civil rights issues. South Africa has a policy called apartheid, and it's starting to be challenged. And apartheid really is even more elaborate than anything that went on in the United States. It was really based on your skin tones, and what you could do, where you could live, types of jobs you could have, where you could go. It was really segregated. We also have something that has really been instrumental in my life that comes out. Star Wars. Okay.
That's true.
Star Wars. With the Trans-Alaska Pipeline that ends up bringing a lot of wealth to Alaska. A lot of people start moving to Alaska. The annual income of individuals was extremely high. They really did focus on trying to get teachers up there, all kinds of stuff. But Alaska got a lot of attention. 78, we have a new pope, John Paul II, that would be elected. We also have reports coming out about a guy by the name of Jim Jones. Jim Jones was an individual who was a religious Fruit Loop from California. I want to say it was California.
Religious.
And he ended up getting all these followers. It was a cult. And these followers sold all their possessions, all this stuff, and they moved to Jonestown, which is named after Jim Jones, but Guyana. And that's in South America. Moved down there, and he had this compound. And he had all these people that were there, and you really couldn't leave. You couldn't leave. You were kind of there, and they kind of kept you there. One of the things that helped to cause the Jonestown massacre was they ended up having a representative from California. He and a group of people went to Jonestown trying to free some of the people that were there because their relatives were wanting to know if they're okay, can they get rid of them? At the Jonestown compound, they had this series of practice runs, I guess you want to call it, to where they would drink Kool-Aid. And the Kool-Aid would have cyanide in it. And poison.
Don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Don't drink the Kool-Aid. That's where that kind of comes from. Or don't follow somebody, so much that you drink the Kool-Aid. So they had done all these practices before and nothing had ever happened. But then they're really pressured everything, and they drink the Kool-Aid. Children, women, men, everything died. Those that figured it out, before the end, some of them were shot. But it was a huge mass suicide, I guess you would call it.
So the religion, you had to drink Kool-Aid, like, was that?
The cyanide was in the Kool-Aid.
It was kind of like a treat. They would give them the Kool-Aid as like a treat. They did very good.
And here's the thing with Kool-Aid. Kool-Aid's cheap.
Yeah.
Kool-Aid's cheap.
And little kids like it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Kill them all.
Anyway. Okay, 79. 79 is, first of all, we have a different president. In 76, we have, first of all, that's our bicentennial, but we also have an election. The election in 76 gives us an outsider, a person who lived outside the Beltway. The Beltway is the freeway that goes around Washington. He was not considered an insider that knew everything, and he's going to bring change. His name was Jimmy Carter, and he was from Plains, Georgia. He was a peanut farmer. A nice guy. He's done more as a statesman after the fact, after being president, than he ever got to do as president. And the reason why is because there were so many people who blocked any action that he did. He was also a peacemaker. He's always trying to find a peaceful solution. Because we just had Vietnam, he's not going to want any sort of conflict. Religious man. Comes from the Navy. He was a Navy, he was high up in the Navy, I
That I
believe.
don't know.
But at any rate, Jimmy Carter goes into office. We have things that are impacting our economy severely. We have interest rates that are 16, 18, 20%, on homes. Farmers are losing their homes. So, people start to blame him for things like that. We end up having problems with OPEC, the oil petroleum exporting countries. So gas prices are starting to really go, nothing like today, but really starting to go up. Then we have a problem with Iran. See, in Iran, we had supported a guy by the name, or we typically call the Shah of Iran. And the Shah of Iran, he, as far as Iran goes, was very westernized. Women had high positions in office. They could go to school, colleges, great things. But while the Shah of Iran was in the United States, and he was, I won't say he had cancer. He was at the Mayo Clinic. They had a coup while they were in Iran. And in Iran, a religious leader by the name of Ayatollah Khomeini, he takes over. And an Ayatollah is kind of like the Pope. But in essence, he created a theocracy. And that's like a government that's ran by religion. So he's going to create this theocracy. And they want to have the Shah of Iran returned to Iran. Of course, we're not going to do that. So now the United States is going to be a major target because we don't support the new leadership in Iran. Protesters then go to the United States Embassy and they take the embassy. They take hostages. Now, you've seen a show, probably called Argo, that deals with this, with a group that didn't get captured. They made their way out of the compound and they make their way to the Canadian Embassy. And Ben Affleck helps them come back to America. That was Argo. That's that other part of it. When we were watching the news, we would always watch the news and it would be so many days. It's like 330 days, the Iran hostage crisis. At one point, we have, in 1980, we even had Jimmy Carter, that I think it was more of an election thing too. So you got to have this last-ditch effort before the 1980 election. And he tries to send, a response to, try to free the hostages. And of course, helicopters crashed, that sort of stuff. It was a fiasco. And that's really what's going to cause Jimmy Carter to lose the 1980 election. He loses that election to Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan's kind of interesting with him. He takes office on January 20, around January 20, it might have been the 19th, but January 20 of 1981, and like 6 or 7 hours later, the hostages are released. So it makes you wonder about the political ramifications of the hostages being released or whatever. But anyway, at least it's controversial. In 1979, we also see something unusual that's going to happen in the United Kingdom. We see a new prime minister come to power, a female, and her name is Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher was an interesting individual. She and Ronald Reagan just were, I mean, they were tight with one another. They got along well. We also see a nuclear accident in the United States at 3 Mile Island, where we have a leak that occurs there. And Sony invents the Walkman.
Go portable music.
And here's the other thing too. Music is changing. You know, the rock music, pop music, we seem to have a little bit of a twist. You know, we have acid rock that even starts to come out during this time, but we also see a little bit of a change. It's more of a lightened change. It's called disco. And disco would come out in the latter part of the 1970s, early part of the 1980s. Clothing styles are definitely different during that. And of course, I think that they're kind of coming back to that now. Let's see. 1980, not only do we have that election that I was mentioning before, we have John Lennon who is assassinated. We have Mount St. Helens that erupts, okay, which was, you know, as far as impacting, my sister lived close to it. So I used to have this jar of ash that was from it I used to keep when I was a kid. Of course, then our house burned and people were like, "Did you find your ash?" We had the Rubik's Cube. We have Pac-Man. See, back in the day, you know, I would get in the car when I wasn't, you know, scheduling my agenda around television, but I would get in the car and I would usually go, you know, like 12 miles away to Searcy and meet up with my cousin. We would go and eat, you know, Pizza Hut, personal hand pizzas, that sort of stuff. But we would spend all of our money on playing Pac-Man and Defender and all of those games that were there. Missile Command, whatever. I know.
What's the little thing with the aliens that look like that? That was my favorite.
Galaga.
Galaga.
Galaga. Love that one too.
So fun.
But I'd spend all kinds of quarters.
Galaga.
My mother owned a store, so I'd go in and get rolls of quarters out of her cash register that she didn't know. We also had something that changes the world, changes America. Ted Turner helps come up with something called CNN, the Cable News Network. Okay, and we start seeing cable news and television shows. You know, we could have not only our 3 channels that we watched, possibly 4, you know, in Little Rock, but we could also pick up something from Atlanta.
Yeah.
And we could also get Chicago.
I think that the idea of cable, you know, like you have a cable box in the house, that idea of cable, that was new.
Yeah.
You didn't just get local TV, you got TV from other places.
And I remember as a kid getting Channel 16. I was like, ooh, yeah, Channel 16, UPN or whatever it was. Oh, well, had a choice. And back in the day, I was the kind of kid that would walk outside and have this little thing called an antenna stuck to your house and twist it around so I could pick up other stations. You guys have never had to deal with the trouble that I did. We also had things back then called a party line.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? You'd get on the telephone and somebody would be talking and you'd like, wait.
Okay,
You'd
no,
wait.
my grandmother, when I was little, she sold a party line, and she would leave the phone off the hook while her neighbors talked on the phone so she could hear all the gossip in the neighborhood. That was our afternoon entertainment. You weren't allowed to turn on the TV because she had to hear the gossip in the neighborhood.
We had assassination attempts on multiple presidents during that time period. We had Gerald Ford, that we had a couple of women that kept trying to kill him. Gerald Ford was an interesting guy. You should Google Gerald Ford and look up his like mishaps, bloopers. This is a guy who's like waving when he's getting off a plane, walks down a little bit with his wife, and then tumbles.
Yes.
He was kind of a klutz. Nice guy, but a klutz. And then we have Ronald Reagan, who actually does get shot by John Hinckley. And, which also caused some problems on who was taking the office when the president was incapacitated. That was a little bit of a trouble because of something that was reported on the news. We have our first female appointed to the Supreme Court, Sandra Day O'Connor. We also have something that everybody in the world watched. Oh my gosh, everybody was glued to the tube. I want to say it was in June. We had the royal wedding.
Oh, yeah.
We had Princess Diana and Prince Charles, Lady Diana and Prince Charles, who got married. And I mean, everybody watched that one.
Princess Kate, Queen, whatever, died.
In '82, we have something that really helps a company called Reese's Pieces. Okay. But we have E.T. that's released.
E.T.
I taught a student a few years ago.
That's so mean. So you have to have a student that looks like to you.
We had a conflict. First of all, remember I mentioned a minute ago about Margaret Thatcher? Okay. We had an issue that came up in a place called the Falkland Islands. The Falkland Islands are off the coast of Argentina. And Argentina decided they wanted to take back what they believed was theirs. Could rightfully have been. But they wanted to take back the Falkland Islands. Now we know today that the Falkland Islands is very important because they have petroleum there. But, you know, really wasn't, you know, huge population of people or anything, kind of not really a hospitable place to be. But by golly, England did not want to have their island taken back. So both of them are sending their naval forces, missiles, everything, you know, that sort of stuff, and they fight for the Falkland Islands. As a nation, we were kind of like, uh-oh, we're friends with Argentina, we're friends with the UK, what do we do? So we kind of just stayed out of it. You know, we tried to negotiate, you know, with them or whatever, but we really didn't get too focused in on it.
It was probably smart for us.
It was smart. Thriller is released. Michael Jackson releases Thriller. Okay, an amazing,
Hey, you know what?
amazing
You know what was released on December 26, 1973? My mother. The Exorcist.
What?
The Exorcist. Because I was looking like stuff that came out in the 70s and like The Exorcist.
I watched this.
It was great.
Jaws was released during that time period too. Now, in '83, because you got to think of fads and that sort of stuff. In '83, something that your mother might have, your grandmother might, or you might even have, you know, in your house from your childhood, something called the Cabbage Patch Kids.
Oh my God.
Now, when it first came out, you know, people would go to Walmart or wherever, and I mean, they would literally fight in parking lots, fight in stores to get these stupid-looking dolls. And you know, yeah.
The guy's name's not on the rear. Xavier something.
Xavier, Sally Ride becomes the first female in space. The Soviet Union, you know, it's still Cold War. You know, we might have had an easing of tensions to some extent, still a Cold War. A Korean airliner is flying, you know, to Korea from Alaska, and it gets shot down because it is too close to Soviet space, and they see the 747 and they just shoot. So that was a little controversial. We have our U.S. Embassy in Beirut is bombed, so Beirut, Lebanon. In 1984, we have a company, a U.S. company called Union Carbide. And the Union Carbide plant in Bhopal, India has a leak, a gas leak. It kills lots and lots of people who are close to it, which then brings a lot of questions by the U.S. on you know, the policies that business has elsewhere.
If he's talking, he'll still.
You know Muhammad Ali?
85, we see Back to the Future. We see Mikhail Gorbachev calls for glasnost and perestroika. He's the Soviet leader that it looks like he has the Soviet Union on his head, kind of imprinted. I always thought that was interesting. He's calling for basically a change. That the Soviet Union would really become more of a democracy.
Yeah, it's relaxing of the communism.
And you'll see the Iron Curtain that will fall, the Berlin Wall will come down in '89, that sort of stuff. Okay, I know I didn't get to complete everything. I'll finish everything on Monday.